Hello, nerds for Yang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds. Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello,
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and true. Come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds. Hello, nerds.
And hello, nerds.
Oh, so Upper West Side, Jonathan. I love it. Well, welcome everybody to the first ever Nerds for Humanity Dream Team panel. I invited you for because we've done a lot of shows for this channel for folks running, and they've all been super impressive. And there are some that I was like, oh yeah, you know, if I only could invite four, these would be the four I'd invite to kind of have a conversation. And hopefully this will be one of many, and we can get other candidate panels going soon and also reassemble this dream team from time to time. So first of all, thank you for coming on and giving us your time. And I think for those who may not be familiar with everyone on this panel, maybe we could just all introduce ourselves, and I'll start in case you're hitting this on replay or it got in some random recommendation and you're like, what's going on? So I'm Tom. I'm the host of this little channel. And I love data and basic income and solving problems, and that's my story. So Heidi, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name's Heidi Briones, and I'm running for Congress in Oregon's 1st District on a platform of universal basic income, universal health care, and democracy reform. I was inspired by Andrew Yang's presidential run, and I really wanted to keep it going. So the second he left the race, I pretty much was on Google figuring out how to run. And I've been figuring it out on the way. Everything's going really well. So I'm super happy to be here with all these awesome people and looking forward to the conversation.
Mike?
All right. My name is Mike Broihier. I'm a Democrat running for U.S. Senate in Kentucky on a policy of economic and social justice for all. I'm a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, and I'm a farmer. And it is my sole mission in life to rid the Republic of Mitch McConnell.
Yes. Get him out of here.
Awesome.
Jermaine?
Hey, everybody. I'm Jermaine Johnson. I'm running for South Carolina House of Representatives District 80. I am the former South Carolina campaign chair for our good friend Andrew Yang. And I am running on a host of policies, but obviously one of them includes a universal basic income, as well as a pilot program that I will be introducing in the next month here in South Carolina. So when I get to the State House, I will go there with proven results on how the universal basic income will be assisting the people in my district and the people of South Carolina. So I'm just excited to be here with the rest of you all, and it's just an amazing opportunity for me to be here with y'all. You too, Heidi. I love you.
Oh.
Jonathan.
Hello, I am Jonathan Herzog. I am running for Congress in New York's 10th District, which covers the west side of Manhattan and South Brooklyn. And I was part of the founding team that helped build Andrew Yang's campaign in 2018. It is so epic, so awesome to be here and see that the entire wave, we are the wave, running in districts across the country to make universal basic income and the entire humanity forward agenda a reality. So thank you all.
What a pleasure it is to have you all on the screen. I should also indicate one housekeeping item for viewers. We would encourage you, even if you are so inclined, as I normally love super chats and super stickers, I've actually put links to the four candidates' websites in the description below. So if you are liking what you're hearing, or you're like, wow, you know, I like all these folks, or I want to pitch in, please check out the links below and consider donating to any of their campaigns or all of their campaigns. I have personally, and I don't regret it at all. So just keep that in mind, folks, if you're watching or if you're seeing this on replay. I think everybody on this panel is really putting a hard fight in to win their election, and resources, with the way that politics works in America today, they do matter. So just keep that in mind. All right. So I think for our first topic I want to hit, and we'll take some viewer questions later on in this conversation. But I guess the first thing I was curious about is like, why did you run, and why did you run now? I mean, you could have run in previous cycles. You could have done other things like just volunteer. What was it about this moment that said to you, like, it's time to throw my hat in the ring? And whoever wants to feels inclined can go first. And you don't, oh, by the way, you guys don't have to answer all of the questions. We can just kind of keep it informal as well. Mike?
When I introduce myself, I am a retired Marine. I'm also married to a retired Marine. So you can imagine how lousy our son's life was, having both mom and dad in the Marine Corps. But we've been farming here in Kentucky for the last 15 years, trying to mind our own business pretty much. And it was the realization for me that Donald Trump is a symptom and Mitch McConnell and people like him are the problem. And that they do not care about the Constitution, and they don't care about the future of the Republic. They care about money and power. And I know we live in the time of superlatives, but it's an existential threat to our democracy and our Constitution, our way of life. And as someone who swore an oath to defend the Constitution, my wife and I talked about this and said, you are uniquely positioned as a farmer, as someone who's taught in public schools here, as a retired combat veteran, to take out Mitch McConnell. And it's a duty. And so about a year ago, we made the decision and launched my campaign in July, and just been running flat out at him ever since.
Let me ask you a follow-up on that one, Mike. Like everything you said makes a ton of sense to me. People make that argument often that, oh, this is the most important election. This is the one that matters. I'm just curious, like, you could have run 6 years ago or 10 years ago. You'd have just as interesting and impressive a record. What was it about this moment in time that you said, I just cannot watch. I have to make a run at it? Because it was an improbable choice that you're going up against the Darth Vader of the Senate, pretty much.
Well, I mean, you may spot a trend, but I hadn't been a farmer either. And my wife and I were on active duty. We came to Kentucky, and 3 days later, we owned a farm. And so you may see a trend where we make a decision, we do things. But it was the actual idea of, I think the nation might survive 4 more years of Trump, but we cannot survive 6 more years of Trump and McConnell. This toxic transactional relationship where Trump's allowed to be himself and McConnell gets to pack the federal bench and give tax breaks to his buddies and donors. I don't want to overstate it, but I honestly felt that the Republic would not survive. We would not recognize this country 4 years from now or 6 years from now. And that's why it's a combination of Trump and McConnell that said, I don't think we will make it. I don't think we will know the country that we come out of on the other end of this if I didn't take a crack at McConnell and knock him out. Thanks.
Yeah, that Trump-McConnell combination is quite a cocktail. So
that's a word for it.
Who else wants to share why they said, I got to do this. I have to do it, and I have to do it now? Jermaine, you just unmuted,
Sure.
So I'm guessing that's you.
Yeah. I'm going to jump on in there. So I kind of felt like, this was the time, because the person who's actually in my district now does not represent what my district is now. Tom, he's 85 years old. We talked about this. And, my district is, mainly rural. And it's got a lot of young African-Americans in this district, as well as elder African-Americans. So the guy who I'm running against is an 85-year-old white guy who has been there for 20 plus years. And it's just time for a change. It's time to pass on that torch. I'm in favor of term limits, because, I don't think that one person should have a monopoly on a seat and believe that it's his seat forever. I believe the best leaders are the ones that on their first day getting into office, they start searching for a successor immediately to start training them up and bringing them along. So after seeing Yang come from this unconventional type of position, running for office, running for president, he was a no-namer. And, when he came to South Carolina the first time, nobody knew who he was, man. He was walking down the street. One guy was like, who was this guy? Why's he got cameras following him? And I'm like, hell, he's running for president. And they were like, president of Charleston? And I was like, no, man, like president of the United States of America. And he went from that to, who he is now. And I just believe that, he just inspired me that, we can start from the bottom and go all the way to the top, man. We can make it run at this. And even if we don't win, we can still have some very positive changes in our communities.
Right on. What about you, Jonathan or Heidi? Do you guys want to share the decision to run?
So I'll say I might be the only one here who could not have run sooner because I am turning 25 in a month. So this was the first time I could. But I mean, like all of you, the urgency of this moment is not past me. 26 million people are unemployed. 50,000 Americans have died. I'm in the epicenter of this, in New York City, where more than 1 million are unemployed. More than 10,000 have died in New York City alone. Congress is still on recess. I mean, the outrage, the sense of the utter disbelief in what shambles of a system and a country that our representatives have left us amidst this global pandemic. And on the backdrop of this fourth industrial revolution, we need representatives across the board who understand the structural crises we're facing and have a vision to tackle them head on. So that's why I'm running, and that's why it's so awesome to see all of you in the arena, because Lord knows we need strong and visionary leadership at this moment in time.
Thanks, Jonathan. I guess you could not legally could not have run earlier.
I literally could not.
You put that law degree to use. What about you, Heidi? How did you, I mean, when you were on Nerds for Yang, the previous name of this channel, we were just fellow Yang gang trying to spread the word, volunteering as we can. And here you are with Oregon -1, like, got a blazer on. It's how did that happen?
I felt like it was my duty and responsibility to my country, to be honest. I mean, I didn't feel like I could, be such a supporter of Andrew's message and the urgency that, he was expressing, that we really need to have policies like this in place, especially universal basic income. I mean, when you understand it at that deep level and when everything clicks and how badly this country needs this, that we absolutely need to abolish poverty, that we absolutely cannot, continue on having people homeless, starving, unable to transition at different periods of their life. When you're an LGBT person who grows up and understands that, your family or your parents might not always want you around. And if you had a basic income, you could have, done so many different things with your life or felt that security. And when you see that 40% of homeless youth are LGBT, and you're just looking at all of the facts and going over your whole life and understanding how this would have changed everything for you and so many people that and that we don't have time. We don't have any more time left to get these things done. And that was the message that I got from Andrew Yang. It was just, hey, this is for the normal people. There is a war happening on the average, ordinary American, and that's wrong. And if you don't stand up and do something about it, then what are you doing? And for me, when he left the race, I mean, how could I listen to him talking about how we need to bring that wave to Washington and how Washington doesn't understand this type of thing, and it's clearly obvious? How could I not do something? And to run just felt the most natural to me in that moment. There was other things that I, of course, could have done, but I didn't see my representative here in District 1 fighting for these things. And I felt compelled to bring that message to my district because I know people need it here. I know that we need it all across the whole country. And I just had to do it. It's my responsibility at this point in time. And I couldn't have predicted that coronavirus and all of this would be happening. But it just makes it even more clear. It just was energizing me even more to keep going. And, it's sometimes you just feel that responsibility in life and you feel a duty to serve. And that's what I look at it as. This is my chance to serve. I wasn't in the military before, like Mike. I didn't have certain chances to serve, but this was my opportunity. This was my moment to actually help the country. And that's why I felt compelled. I had to do it.
Right on. I mean, I think you're all making a really strong point about the relevance of basic income. I mean, it was always something that, folks who were supporting Andrew Yang saw as an important, kind of investment for the country. But now with this coronavirus crisis and probably the deep recession that we're going to see for a while, it seems even more important. I'm curious, when you talk to your constituents, it's easy to look at the federal level at like, okay, unemployment rate is this, and there's this many people filing for unemployment, and there's these, stimulus packages going out. But when you're on the ground talking to folks locally, what are you hearing and seeing in terms of the impact of this coronavirus on your district or your state, and what do you think we should be doing about it?
Yeah, I can just jump in, but I mean, there's a lot of things concerning when I talk to constituents in my district. One of the main things is that they don't even know who their representative is, which is very concerning. They come to me with questions because they see me active and talking to people. So they're like, Heidi, can you help me with this? I, don't know where to get unemployment, or I don't know how to get food and things like this. And I do what I can. And I just ask them like, hey, do you know what district you're in? Let's look it up together. Oh, okay. This is your representative. It's actually who I'm running against, who like technically you should know who they are and you should be able to be in contact with them. And that's disturbing to me for the state of our country and our democracy. So that's one of the things that I've noticed is that people don't know who's representing them. And to me, that signals a broken democracy because they should be able to reach out to their local, state, and federal representatives when they need help with something, know who they are, be able to connect with them, and get the help that they need. They also tell me that when they contact them, they're told ridiculous things like, Amanda Seeby, who's running with me actually against Bonamici, she's a disabled rights activist. She is disabled, and she reached out directly to the representative for help and was told to just call Meals on Wheels. And she found that very disturbing because that is not actually, an appropriate response to what her situation was, and that, people in her apartment complex are running out of food. And they were thinking of, starting like a kitchen or something. And she was just told, well, why don't you just call Meals on Wheels to try to get help? And that's not even an appropriate program for what she's talking about. So very disturbing. The job that our representatives are doing concerns me. I know some are doing a good job and doing the best that they can, but I think the grand majority are failing and are serving corporate interests. And it's disturbing when I talk to my constituents, when I find those things out.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, I think people often forget that, these Congress people, they are supposed to be providing a service to the constituents. They're not kind of in these big concrete offices in DC, just wielding power. They're supposed to provide help and advice to the local constituents. So that's certainly, disturbing to hear. And it sounds like you'll be more of a constituents first type Congress member. Jermaine, what are you seeing on the ground in South Carolina?
The same thing. It's the incumbent that we have here. In light of this pandemic we have going on, he has not made any type of statement. He has not come out to say, "Hey, constituents, we're going to make it through this." He's not giving no type of hope to anybody. No sharing of resources, nothing, literally nothing. I've been the one kind of acting as the representative this entire time. Like I've been the one, using my resources to, make it known for my people out here that, hey, this is available to you. Or, I've done robocalls, and the robocalls that just say, hey, if you don't have health care, go to this free clinic or that free clinic. If you have any type of symptoms or anything going on, I've been doing all those different things. So I've been, acting as a representative in conjunction with the representative that's like my next door neighbor, who is Wendy Brawley. So we've kind of been in tandem doing this thing to represent the people who live in our area. And my area is filled with poverty. It's filled with poverty. And so when you have a poverty-stricken area, your representatives have to provide some sort of hope. These people who are already struggling, and you're not telling them that they're going to make it through it. You're not telling them that it's going to be okay. You're not telling them that, hey, this is coming here or that's going to be there. Or you're not telling them anything. And we all know what it's like to, if we're going through something, we want somebody to talk to us and tell us it's going to be okay. So, like somebody give me some hope. That's why President Obama resonated so much with so many people. He was giving people hope. Like, yes, we can. We can make it through this. We're strong. We're stronger together. And when you have somebody who's just silent and isn't saying anything, so you have other people who are saying, well, I don't even know who my representative is. Like, I don't know who he is. Or the people who know who he is, like, well, he's 85. He needs to be gone. It's a problem that we have to address. We've got to fix it. And people, the Democratic Party right now, I mean, we know that they have taken constituents' votes for granted. They're not. It's like, I want your vote now, and then I won't knock on your door for 2, 4, 6 years. Then it comes around, and they're like, all right, now I'm going to knock on your door again. No. We need transparency. We need accountability. We need somebody who's tangible, like myself. I'm going to be in the community, like I am in the community, talking to people, knocking on doors. I was knocking on doors before I decided to run for office, and just asking people, hey, what can I do to help you in your situation? Before I even decided to run for office, I was doing that. Before I decided to run for office, I was mentoring the kids. Before I decided to run for office, I was volunteering my time in that community. Before I decided to run for office, I was doing that. So you darn Skippy, after I win this seat, I will be even more accessible to my people.
Right on. What about you, Mike? What are you seeing on the ground in Kentucky? I mean, I remember when we were last talking on the show, you had mentioned that Kentucky has, some industries that are not, growing super fast, and now the economy can't be better since we last talked. Are you seeing the impact from your constituents, or?
I mean, things are bad in Kentucky. We got the 5th worst economy in the nation. So, with horrific opioid epidemic. But I want to address what Jermaine was talking about as far as telling people things are going to be okay. We managed to evict a Republican governor in 2019. And if you just quickly Google Andy Beshear, Mr. Rogers, you will come up with 1 million memes about our new governor. And he does talk every night at 5 o'clock. And he's the voice of calmness and reason. And if I'm doing donor calls and I hit someone at 4:55, they'll say, hey, Mike, sorry, got to go. Love you, brother, but it's Andy time. And they hang up and they go watch the governor. And but here's the thing about our governor is that he made unpopular decisions early. We have Republican-controlled Senate and House here in Kentucky, and he, relatively newly, he came into office in January, and then so we had a couple months before this pandemic hit, but right away shutting down the schools, shutting down the businesses, social distancing, constantly hitting that media, hitting the media, telling them what we needed to do in the face of huge opposition. And he really showed the moral courage to make those decisions, which are so important for leaders. And all you have to do is take a look at it. And here's another thing you can Google to get a great meme is Kentucky versus Tennessee, COVID-19 or something like that. And you'll come up with a great chart that shows Kentucky fairly flat and Tennessee up through the roof, because their governor is not taking charge. He's not leading. And, everything's fine in Tennessee, to the point where I have friends and obviously soon to be constituents who are on the Tennessee border, and they've been asked to please not go to Tennessee. And really it's an imaginary line on the ground, but the difference between our two states comes down to one thing, and that's leadership. and making bold decisions early, despite them being unpopular, and then telling people what's going to be on the other side. We're going to get through this together. We're going to work through this. You're doing a good job. But, he's facing resistance. It's being cheer-led from Washington. People were, standing outside of his office, blowing horns and screaming at him to open up the economy. But he's standing firm, and I couldn't be prouder to have supported him. And I mean, that is the kind of leadership that we should all hope to emulate, that will be willing to make tough decisions, stick with them for the betterment of our constituents and the betterment of the nation. So.
Jonathan, you are in kind of ground zero for coronavirus in terms of just number of cases and deaths per capita and other measurements. What is it like in Manhattan and in New York right now? And what do you think that if you were in Congress, anything, how would things be different for your constituents?
Yeah, so it is ground zero in many ways, including literally covering the World Trade Center and the world's financial capital. So the 10th District of New York is one of the most unequal districts, where you have nearly 2/3 of all people working in financial services, but then you have 1 in 6 people living in poverty, unable to meet their basic needs. So on opposite sides of the same street, even on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, you have squalor and public housing, and then you have luxury housing developments that often sit vacant as foreign investment vehicles. And so to the question about what you hear from people is, when we were out gathering signatures to get on the ballot on the Upper West Side, for example, frankly, many of these folks are out in the Hamptons or out on Long Island. And this is just, again, to your point about it being the ground zero for the financialization of the economy, for the automation of the most common jobs, and for the winner-take-all extreme polarity of the biggest winners with the network effects in technology and finance, and the biggest losers. And so many of the biggest winners have fled the city. And so one of the things I've been doing to help bridge and help illustrate is I actually looked at the data on German unemployment pre and post the Great Depression in the decade around the 1920s and 1930s. And what you see is a near 1-to-1 correlation with an increase in German unemployment in the wake of the Great Depression and the seats that the Nazi Party gained in the Reichstag. And one of the realities demographically about the 10th district is it's not only one of the gayest district in the country, it's also the most Jewish district in the country, including one of the most concentrated Orthodox Jewish enclaves that has been on the front lines of an increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes over the past number of years. And what I've been trying to communicate and convey to these people is that this too affects you, even for those who are able to escape, even for those who may not see the death and desperation on the streets. This too will affect them. This is an all of us challenge, an existential challenge. And so those are some of the conversations that when we were campaigning and getting Andrew on the ballot here in New York a number of months ago, one of the things you'll hear is, that I heard was, oh, we love Andrew, he should run for mayor of New York City, but all this, $1,000 stuff, it's kind of out there. It's kind of theoretical, hypothetical, even though by the data, New York and urban cities like it have a majority support. And now we know the entire country does for a form of a universal basic income. But now we're in a totally different landscape. When 1 in 30 people will know someone or have been affected by COVID directly, we're in a totally different structural landscape. To make the case, it's not a them issue, it's not a far out futuristic issue. This is now, this is us, this is all of us.
Well, so let me ask you, the panel, this question. If you were in Congress when they were debating the stimulus, obviously we've talked about basic income between the, five of us just in the last 10, 20 minutes. There's an argument that, hey, the reason why the stimulus was constructed was to provide targeted financial support to key industries, small businesses, hospitals, now a farm bill coming up. And that if we had given a basic income to everyone, we would have kind of spread this these resources across too thin of a swath of the country. And it wouldn't have been as helpful as what the folks in DC did. How would you, what are your thoughts? I mean, are you sympathetic to that, or how would you have wanted this now $2.5 trillion, I think, dollars spent?
Send it to the people.
Yep.
There you go. Let's do a show of hands.
Yeah. Send it to the people. I mean, come on now.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we need to help the medical field and the hospitals and get supplies, and that's clearly should have been part of it. But I mean, when you have a massive percentage of the bill that's bailouts for, large industries that shouldn't be too big to fail. These companies should be too big to fail. That's part of capitalism. So I don't know if they're aware of that, but they should not be allowed to be bailed out constantly, because that's actually not the true free market economy. So I think that that's disturbing at the very least. So I've thought about that a lot. And the more I think about it, the more I think that I would have to take a stand and be like, I have to vote no against this if it's not meeting my thresholds. It's like it has to meet the thresholds of having the grand majority of it going directly to people, direct cash transfers to people. If that's not the grand majority of your relief bill, then it's frankly BS. And I don't think that I could stand for that. The more I think about it, the more I feel like compelled that I would have to, take a very fervent stand against it.
Yeah, I don't feel like they even considered the way the market works across the United States. Like, I think they just picked that number out of thin air. Like, I don't think that, because you got to think, in California, my parents, they live in a 2-bedroom apartment in, kind of like a rundown neighborhood, and their rent is $1,500 a month. So what's $1,200 going to do for the rent, that month, things like that. So, we didn't really even consider, what that $1,200 is going to do for people. And if we are listening to our scientists and what they're predicting on how COVID is going to affect us for over the next 3, 4, 5 months, what was $1,200? How long is that $1,200 supposed to go? And then they gave all this money to these big corporations to bail them out. But what about the small mom and pops people? The money ran out so quick that the majority of Main Street didn't get anything. I know my small business, we didn't get anything. So it's like, I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate around things and how to keep people, paid. But what's going on with the real people that really needed this stimulus bailout? What's going on with those people? I don't think anybody up there in Congress spent a day down in these bad areas where they really needed the assistance.
Well, it just goes to the priorities, and I've been saying this, I've been campaigning since last July, and this obsession with tying the health of the economy, the health of the nation, to the stock market. It is not reflective of life here in Kentucky. I'll tell you, I'm sitting in here in comfort talking to you right now. My wife is right outside that window next to me in the freezing cold rain picking asparagus, because that's our crop. That's what we grow here. And I'm in here nice and warm talking to you, but she's out there freezing because we got customers coming here this afternoon to pick up supplies, because we feed our local economy. When you see it on the ground, and as Jermaine said, the people on Main Street not getting anything. And for me, it was always, Donald Trump has tied the success of his administration to the stock market, and they just wrote it into the ditch. And the priority of the way the money was given out in DC the whole time was to keep the stock market afloat. But people out here, people in central Kentucky, do not wake up in the morning and say, geez, S&P's doing great. You know, they got to go to work. They got to pay their bills. They're worried about whether the next illness or an accident is going to bankrupt their family. And so it's a total failure to represent the interests of most Americans. And that was, and Democrats went along with it. No, I understand we wanted to get money out to people, but the priority of this always has been to keep the stock market afloat and to have the Trump administration have something to point to and say again.
Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, how embarrassing is it that it took Andrew Yang and Ariana Grande to send the single biggest direct cash transfer in American history to shame to our federal legislature and the federal purse, which has the biggest scale and scope and budget and capability to enact real structural change on the global level. It's just embarrassing and shocking. But I will say this just illustrates how critical and how grateful I am to all of you for running and the many, many more that will be inspired to run, because nothing changes in Washington. Nothing changes unless feet are held to the fire and politicians have incentives. Incentives come in the form of primary challengers and competitors and the fear of losing an election. And that is what we are offering directly to some of the most powerful people in our country and world today.
Well, I can't disagree with that when we have on this panel someone running against Nadler and someone running against McConnell. Those are well-known names. Let me ask you all this. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit. You know, it's not just the Republicans that are against basic income. There are plenty of card-carrying Democrats who would argue, why should someone like Tom on Nerds for Yang get any basic income, Nerds for Humanity, get any basic income? He's fine. He lives well. You know, Mike's got a big farm. He doesn't need any money. You know, the stimulus was designed to help small businesses, and that money more should go to the people who really need it, not to middle class, not to upper class, certainly not to people who are making millions and millions of dollars. Like, why should the good resources of this country go to rich people?
Right. Well, I would say to people that support means-tested, basic income or, means-tested emergency UBI, such as Representative Bonamici in my district, who came out for a means-tested version, that when you means-test these programs, you leave out people on the margins, okay, like on the borderline. So if you say 75K is your spot, okay, there's somebody that made, $75K and $1. Like, it's literally as silly as that, to where you can leave out people on these margins, on the people that just don't qualify. So that's the problem, is that there's so many stories that I hear constantly of people, messaging me about how they didn't get their stimulus for XYZ ridiculous reason. Students, like all these different people that are just on the margins, people that don't file taxes for whatever reason, couldn't get access to it. So when you do this, you leave out so many people, and these are the untold stories. It's not about the millionaire or billionaire who happened to get the $1,200. That's irrelevant. It's the people that we're leaving out that's really important. And that's the key to universality to me, is that you do not want to have those stories of people left out who needed that help. You don't know their stories. You don't know what they need help for. You have no idea. Just because somebody looks wealthy or they sound wealthy or whatever else their story is, everybody is this close to financial ruin in our economy. That's how fragile things are. So you can't leave out anybody on the margins and not have full universality, or you're going to have these stories of people that are left out and they don't feel included or special or important when they are, and when their country should value them.
What if they said, Heidi, okay, maybe 75,000, but clearly if someone makes more than 500,000, gosh darn it, they shouldn't get a penny from basic income.
Okay, fine. I mean, are they not part of our country? I mean, and can't they not give that money away if they don't need it? Like, shouldn't we, hold like our citizens to a higher standard? Like, what do we think these rich people are going to do with this money? I don't know about you, but when I get something that I don't need, I give it to somebody who does. And that's generally how humans act. We have to realize that humans are not these like conniving, evil creatures that we somehow like want to perceive ourselves as, or other people as, like, oh, rich people are just greedy and they don't deserve it, or poor people are just gonna like blow it on cigarettes and booze, or these are all just ridiculous concepts. And actually humans, if you look at actual research, do the right thing a grand majority of the time. And if we gave that money to a rich person, they know somebody who needs that money. A lot of those people have nonprofits. They're very big on philanthropy. So, I mean, look at Bill Gates. I mean, one of the richest, sometimes the richest, depending on the year, man in the world. And he does an incredible amount of work, all around the globe. And I guarantee he would do something good with that money if it ended up in his hands. So it's just absurd that we, think so poorly of ourselves and our country and our people that we don't think that money would go to good use, no matter where it ends up.
Yeah. I need to jump in with what Heidi was saying, because, I for some reason we feel like, if the rich people get this money, that is going to make, somehow diminish our worth or something like that, and I even made that way back when Andrew was running, because, most people, they know my story and where I come from and, how I was poor, but how I'm okay now. My wife is a doctor and we, we're okay now. So I had actually committed I said, if Andrew Yang, when he gets in there and enacts the UBI, that I was going to give away my whole first year of my UBI to foster kids, because I know foster kids will need this. They're under the age of 18 and they will need this assistance. So I was already committing to donate my stuff away, because I was like, I don't need it. They need it more than I do. So it's like we're acting like people are inherently bad. People are not inherently bad. People have good intentions, and they will be, it's going to increase philanthropy. Imagine going to church when people are going to church and they're saying, don't look at your neighbor at your left or your right, just give what you can give. Imagine now going to church when people actually have something to give. What's that going to do for the church? Now, now the building fund is really a building fund. Now these things, actually get done in the church, and people in the communities actually can do stuff in the communities. I mean, just because I'm a rich person doesn't mean I don't know somebody who's not in need. And then you got individuals who went to school, who they may be making this $150,000 or $500,000, but they're $500,000 in school debt and student loan debt. So and their bills, their student loan payments every month are $2,000. You have to think about these things. It's like it's taking a lot of that away from them. So you don't know everybody's situation. Everybody's situation is definitely unique, but this will be ultimately a good thing for America.
Yeah, I think we have to call bullshit, frankly, on any argument that goes to the effect of means testing or targeted programs are more progressive than universalized ones, because it is empirically, verifiably false, and it is gaslighting, plain and simple. And to your point, Tom, this is promulgated most powerfully because they have this veil by senior Democratic leadership, because they can claim we have the D next to our name, so this must be the truth. It is, you can run the math on it. It is simply not. And one of the main reasons is that we are bleeding our state governments in particular, but also our federal government dry. And we have a big revenue issue in the United States because we don't have a large prospective, before the fact base of taxation through a mechanism like a value added tax, a universal consumption tax across the board. We have a massive revenue issue in the United States. And so any discussion of cash going out has to include a discussion of cash going in. So this argument is just frankly bullshit. Run the numbers, do the math. It is gaslighting, plain and simple, by senior Democratic leadership and Republicans alike.
Why do you think the Democratic leadership is, or some of the Democratic leadership is pushing this argument?
So there is a historical path dependency, which is, it just means the reality of how the Democratic Party has gotten votes, has won elections, has campaigned, has historically been based in the industrial manufacturing base and unionized labor, and essentially putting and pitting class and capital versus labor against one another. This is just the history of how the Democratic Party has gained currency and has gained power. The challenge, one of the challenges that Andrew's campaign illustrated, is tragically this base is evaporating because these communities we've decimated, they're being sucked dry, and so the Democratic Party is left flailing and wondering, well, what's our new base? And so what we saw is that new base was reinvented to be the base of identity. If we can't divide people and can't get their votes on the basis of class or on labor versus capital, then we can try to get them on the basis of identity. And so what we have to do, what's incumbent upon us, is to offer a new progressive alternative that transcends identity, that transcends class. And the time-tested way to do that is universalism. Universal policies like Social Security and Medicare have stood the test of time in large part because they are universal.
Right on, Jonathan. I feel you. Mike, what do you think? What's your take? You know, you might run in to some senior senators in the Democratic Party who are going to be like, well, we can't give any money to people that earn more than X. Like, we have to save it for the people who really need it.
Yeah, I don't care what Chuck Schumer says. I mean, they picked the candidate here in Kentucky, and they're trying to pretend that there's not a primary here, and they're putting their finger on the scale. It's fine. So the good thing about running a campaign like mine is you don't owe nobody nothing when you get to Washington. But I'm going to say this as a Marine. I appreciate simplicity. And when you get to means testing anything, it causes loopholes. We build a tax system and immediately begin piling in loopholes. As soon as you start putting in one exception, there's exception after exception after exception. And I would rather take, the handful of those evil rich that are going to take their UBI and put it in the basement and swim in it like Scrooge McDuck. I'll take that risk. And as long as we're getting hands into people that matter, it's worth the price. And so, like I said, as a Marine, kind of a simple guy, and that's why I want to keep it.
All right. Well, I know, Mike, you're going to have to go in about 10 minutes. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and ask you all a question, not about policy, but about kind of who you are, what made you who you are today, what kind of influenced you. So the question is, when you think back, many of us have either experienced struggle or great achievement, or sometimes a combination of the two, that shaped like who we are today and what makes us our core values, what they are. And I was curious if you wouldn't mind sharing an example of something that in your past you experienced that really informed how you think about the world or think about yourself.
I'm going to jump on this one, Tom, because I got to punch out here in a few minutes. And first of all, it's been great. Thanks for having us. And I'm sorry I can't hang out for the rest of the time, but I actually have another commitment. For me, I think it was probably 1992, 1993. Some of you may not remember that. But Jonathan particularly, there was a drought and a famine in the Horn of Africa and a civil war in Somalia. And so, first George Bush said, if we don't do something about this, it'll be a scar on the soul of our nation, because we could. And so I was in 29 Palms, California. My battalion was sent to Somalia during the Civil War. And I went there as a provisional rifle company. I'm an artillery guy. We have an artillery battalion. We left our cannons in California and we just packed up our rifles and went. But to see firsthand starvation like people literally starving to, and the horrifying things you see, the violence that it brings and the despair that it brings. And even in that, it's caused me, I reflect back, I think about it all the time. It's sad but true. But one of the things that really struck me is that, so this nation's torn apart by civil war, just torn apart. And people are starving. There's no food, there's no water, there's no medicine. Every single day, planes would fly in from other parts of Africa, the outskirts of Mogadishu, and they would bring in a narcotic drug called khat that people chewed. For you nerds, that's khat is a Scrabble word, and it can be spelled Q-A-T and K-H-A-T. So put that in your Scrabble dictionary. But my point is this: is that even in the height of this civil war and violence and starvation, people were still self-medicating, and even though they had no money for food, they could still buy drugs. And it made the pain go away, made the hunger go away, made the fear go away for a little while. And so when we have this opioid epidemic, it may not have affected Oregon or New York the way it's affected, say, South Carolina or West Virginia or Kentucky. And people self-medicate when they're despairing. And so it's up to us guys, to break that cycle of despair. We got to bring some hope. People say, how do you stop the opioid crisis? Well, stop letting, pill companies, sell drugs to a community, one pill for every man, woman, and child in some county in West Virginia. Yeah, you stop that. But you get rid of the despair and the fear. And I think things will get better. So that's on us to lead this path forward. So I've had a few transformative experiences. That's just one of them.
I got to ask you a follow-up on that one, Mike. I mean, did you ever think that you would draw an analogy between a terrible situation like what happened in Somalia and in a developing country and what some of us are seeing in the United States of America, that some communities are struggling with these challenges with addiction and poverty in the wealthiest, most successful country in the face of the planet?
Well, I mean, so if you take a look at Martin County, Kentucky, which is in far eastern Kentucky, Appalachia, you cannot drink the water or bathe in the water that comes out of the tap. This is America. There's a woman out there named Barbie Ann Maynard, and she's been fighting single-handedly for the last 15 years this fact that you cannot even drink the water in Martin County. You shouldn't let your children bathe in it. And sadly, she was recognized by the UN. There's going to be UN Water Day in Martin County, Kentucky. I mean, she had that much international attention. She fought this great fight. And then the pandemic hit and the moment passed. But she was a guest on Chicken Bristle Live. But when you go to Louisville, Kentucky, there's a symptom they called west of 9th Street. And if you live west of 9th Street, there's a measurable difference in your life expectancy if you live west of 9th Street, largely African-American. And there's the infant mortality rate is significantly higher if you just live west of 9th Street in Louisville. So it's this pollution, and it causes despair. So you've got problems in metro areas like Louisville, and they're reflected on the farther side of the state. And a lot of them are environmental problems, but a lot of them are economically driven as well. So I just don't think, we think of ourselves as a first world nation. We shouldn't have those problems, but there's places in Kentucky where the air will kill you and you can't drink the water.
Well, Mike, hopefully you get to the Senate and help be part of the solution. I know you Marines are very punctual, and I know you have another obligation to go to, but I wanted to thank you for coming on the panel and invite everyone to check out Mike for Kentucky.com, link below. And Mike, we got to get you back on the show soon.
Anytime, my friend. Heidi, great to see you again. Jonathan, good to meet you. Dr. Johnson, great to meet you.
Bye, Mike.
Thank you for running, Mike.
Awesome to
Let's
see
win.
you, Mike.
Win
Let's
big, Mike.
win. Let's go.
I'm out.
Give him hell, Mike. See you.
Go.
All right. Heidi, Jonathan, and Jermaine, do you guys have time to hang out for a little bit longer, or do you guys also, if you need to break off, totally understand? I know we've been on for almost an hour. I'm
sitting here with you, brother.
I got time. I got time for you.
Absolutely. My only constraint is that I'm an idiot and my computer is not charging. So that is my only constraint. So once you
get a charger in there.
You got battery level anxiety. I know that feeling.
Oh, it's the worst.
All right. So who wants to share a little bit about their past that kind of affected them in a profound way that made you who you are today?
I'll jump in since I'm already unmuted, I guess.
All right, go for it.
The main thing I think that shifted my worldview, made me really who I am, was the time that I spent living and teaching English abroad. So living in Asia, lived there for about 3 years. And that changed me quite a bit in ways that still kind of come out. Sometimes I still feel like I'm having reverse culture shock in my own culture. A lot of times just because I spent, great part of my 20s teaching English and living in other countries and working primarily with people from other cultures. So that really just informed the way I think about things. I mean, sometimes when, we're talking about certain issues like universal healthcare, for example, I'm just befuddled that people think we can't do it here when every single other place I've lived or traveled to has it, and they seem to be doing just fine and without any issues. So things like that come up. But I mean, also more importantly, it's made me more empathetic and more, able to understand other cultures and how they operate. And when you live in another country and you pull out your wallet or whatever you have, and you have a little card in there that says alien resident, you have a certain feeling about who you are and your place in where you're actually living. And when people look at you funny for the way that you look, because you look different than everybody else, you're like, wow, this is the experience of a lot of people in America, because they come and people look at them a certain way, or they feel like they don't fit in. And these could be immigrants or all the different diversity that we have. So it makes me realize, my privilege that I've had, in my own country, and I don't take that for granted. I understand that, people have so many different ways of life and they're all valid. And they have so many different ways of thinking about things that are all valid. And it's just made me, I think, a better person to understand another culture and live in it. And so I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity. I wish more people had the opportunity to live in another country, or at the very least another region of our own country, so that they can understand, the plights of other people. And I think that would make society and globally just better.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up on that, Heidi, because a lot of people would say, hey, we're Americans. We have the most modern technology, the most powerful economy, the best democracy in the whole world. What do we need to learn from wherever you may have lived? Like, they follow us. We're America.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, they follow certain things that we do, definitely. But what can we learn from other cultures is vast, and I would encourage people to open their minds. But one thing is, we in America, everything is about the individuals. It's so framed around the individual that we lose sight of the group and the whole so many times. I mean, even our conversation of universality, how people will fight against universality, and that's part of individualism. In other countries, many countries around the world, they value the group over the individual. I'm not saying that's better, but that's a completely different framework. That's a completely different framing of everything in your entire life. From when you wake up in the morning, if you're thinking about the group first and not yourself first, you make decisions differently. So I think that we need to consider that there's not just one way to frame our society. And as Americans, we're so xenophobic in a lot of ways and individualistic in so many ways, that we could learn to understand the group more, understand the community more, understand our place socially a lot more, and understand our decisions affect the whole group as a whole. And, neither one is good or bad or right or wrong. It's just, these are different frameworks, and we should understand that and be able to learn from different frameworks all around the world.
Thank you. Jonathan, what about you, man?
Yeah, I would say there are maybe two central elements of outsiderness that have really shaped who I am and how I've come to see the world. The first being the son of immigrants from Israel. My parents' grandparents fled the pogroms after seeing their parents burnt alive in their own homes. And so there's this level of multi-generational trauma where I would visit family in Israel growing up, and it seems kind of insane to us, but every single apartment or every single place where you live or are in Israel, you actually have a built-in rocket shelter, bomb shelter. And so growing up and visiting family there, like you would just have to go to the shelter because there's a national siren system because the country is constantly under rocket and missile attacks. Now there's a much better defense system with the Iron Dome. But I was looking back at photos of me, I was like 5 or 6 years old and I'm wearing a full body gas mask suit because there were talks of chemical warheads being attached to the missiles. And so in every house, you had to duct tape a safe room. And if the siren were to ring, you had to put on your gas masks. And as a kid, you had this like full body gas suit. And just even recently last year, and I was driving around Iowa, and I'm with Andrew in the car, and this is like the day that he qualifies for the DNC debate because we got that $65,000 donation. And I was scrolling back through my WhatsApp messages with my sister who lives in Israel now, and it was I had like 5 or so missed calls, and it goes like, Yang is now up to number 15 in the Rolling Stone ranking, and like, and then it was like Yang is almost at like the 65K mark, and then the next message is siren hit, rockets attacking Tel Aviv, heading to shelter. And this is like March like 11th or 12th, 13th of 2019, and she's, it's like 4 a.m. She was born and raised in New York. She went to all the acclaimed institutions, went to medical school, and now working at a biotech startup in Tel Aviv. And she, again, this is just part of your everyday life. She's running to the shelter at 4 a.m. And then I'm like, you up? because we're so desensitized to this. It's just baked into the fiber of daily life. And so I think that's one very powerful lens through which I see the world. And then one other is another level of outsiderness from within the home. And so coming out to conservative parents, even though I was in one of the most liberal, progressive cities, was the hardest thing, and still, is a source of strain and pain. And I think Yuval Harari has put it well. He's a gay Israeli historian, and he says when you realize that, in the case of like your mother or your parent, this like source of gospel, this kind of source of truth, the source of the kind of unconditional love, right, that our kind of family is or theoretically built on. When that comes into question, when that falters, when you realize that all you have is yourself, for me, the way that manifested is I unconsciously became so obsessed with what is the truth. And I have no tolerance for gaslighting. I have no tolerance for bullshit. And I'm just obsessed with what is the truth. How do we find the truth? Because in large part of this experience, again, growing up being an outsider and feeling entirely on my own, and feeling like I had to build from the foundation, from the bottom up in my own life.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. hopefully, you know that I'm sure your family is super important to you, and hopefully you feel like this group, this movement, is also part of your extended family. And even though we've never met in person, I feel you, man, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But I hope hope things get better. Yeah.
No, but this is truly what it makes this movement and all of you and everyone fighting for it so transcendent and just incredible. Because to me, the promise of it gets better is hollow without the promise of independence and financial security in the case your family or community rejects you for who you are. And to me, this entire movement, universal basic income, is all about unconditional love. And in the 10th district, like where I'm running, there's almost 5,000 LGBT youth who are homeless. And like I think of myself, as no better, no worse than anyone else, and know how luck and randomness is one of the strongest predictors of where you end up. And that to me is the power of a universal basic income, of the Humanity Forward agenda, is it says unconditional love for all.
Jermaine, what you mentioned that you grew up with some sort of more modest means, and I'm not sure what it's like growing up in South Carolina. I mean, what has been your experience that has shaped who you are today?
Man, where can I start, man? Well, I tell this story regularly because I do speeches and talks for the youth in my community to let them know that their past doesn't define their future. So where I'm from, I'm originally from California, Los Angeles, and that was the 80s, man. I tell this when I was usually introducing Andrews, how I was born during the crack era. And I lost family members to drugs and gang violence, to jail and death. My oldest brother was murdered by a guy who was selling drugs and who was supposed to be his friend. My parents, in and out of jail, addicted to crack and all different types of things like that. My other brother showed me my first crack rock. I've been homeless, man. I've lived in motels. I've slept on people's couches, and I've been through a lot, man. I've been through a lot. But going through all of that, it was, I was actually able to parlay my side because, not everybody can be 6'7", 250 pounds of just athletic chocolateness, man. So, me being the athletic, somebody was actually around there and was saying, hey, you know what, this guy could be something. And my AAU coach was actually able to send me to a prep school. And when I got to prep school, that's when I saw that, life didn't have to be the way that I was used to seeing it. There was other things out there. And I saw other kids, the way that they were growing up and the way their parents were and the way that their family lives were. So I started to see things differently. And then, I went through that and I was able to graduate from college. I got to college, graduated from college and continued studying and got my master's degree and then got my doctorate degree. So I went from homeless to Dr. Johnson. And I tell people that all the time. I said, man, listen, I literally went from homeless to Dr. Johnson. I beat every statistic that was supposed to be against me. So that's when I do the things that I do, and I'm so involved with as much as I'm involved with, is to give people some hope, to let people know that, hey, listen, I'm a tangible, example of what you can be, of who you can be, of where you can go, of the different things you can learn. These are the things that kind of shape me in my life. And, I even got to one point to where I've been able to overcome so much that I was just, I became like kind of expectant of it. So I kind of even did myself, wrong one day when I tell this story about me mowing my lawn. And I was outside mowing my lawn, and it's hot in South Carolina and humid and, all that. And I was mad because I had to mow my own lawn, and I got to this point where I stopped, and like it was like God or somebody was speaking to my soul, man. And I just stopped and I started crying, and I was so emotional because I said, man, listen, I got my own lawn. And I'm like, man, I'm out here mad and I'm upset that I'm mowing my own lawn. Like, I own this yard, I own this house, and I've been homeless, man, and I didn't have anything. And I went through all this stuff, but yet I'm out here upset about mowing my own lawn. So I just sat there and I cried and I cried and cried and cried out there. And, from then I was like, man, I have to be, appreciative of the things that I've been blessed with, man. I'm a blessed man to even be sitting here on this live stream and have people watching, to say, hey, Dr. Johnson, we appreciate you. I mean, y'all have no idea what it does to my spirit to even be sitting here with you all right now. So that type of stuff right there has really shaped who I am. Is my upbringing to where I am now, and I know what it's like to be one of the marginalized individuals that are in America right now. I know what it's like. I know what they're crying for. I know what they're asking for. I know what they're going through. I'm an example, and I know what they want, and I know what they need in terms of if you just give them a little bit of hope of who they can actually be, the potential that these people have, and we've just completely written them all off. So I can speak to them, I can speak to them. And, if you have ever done any mentoring and you talk to the youth, and it's like the youth that are in these disadvantaged communities, and you talk to them and the first thing they say is, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know anything about this. And I tell them, I do know what you're going through. I've been there. I've been homeless. I know what you're talking about. I know what it's like to have parents like that. I know what it's like to lose family members. I know what it's like. So let me help you. Let me help you get to this. And then right after that, they're like, oh man, like, Dr. Johnson knows what he's talking about. It's about being an example to people, man. And that stuff has actually helped shape me to be who I am today.
Did we lose Tom?
I think we lost Tom. We have
no.
buffering Tom.
We just take over his channel now. I think we were supposed to say goodbye to Jonathan. So Jonathan, thank you so much for being on Nerds for Humanity. You're an inspiration for sure to a lot of people, and win. I mean, seriously.
Wow. Thank you guys so much. I'm so grateful and proud and excited for your big wins in just a few weeks. And yeah, just thank you for running in the first place. Because we are all at the vanguard. Like, we are all at the bleeding edge to make this wave and to make this vision a reality. So I love you guys. So proud of you.
You too. Love you.
And thank you for making it happen.
Thanks, Jonathan. You're awesome.
Thank y'all so much, man. Y'all are amazing. I love all y'all, man. It's just, I appreciate, everything that you all are doing. Just giving people some inspiration, man. I can't imagine, I think all three of us have these unique angles and viewpoints, man, that are really inspiring people out there right now. And just how Andrew inspired us, I think we are inspiring a whole nother generation of individuals who are going to run after us. And I think we have an obligation, but the ability to actually change the future from now, starting right now, change generations now. And I'm just excited about it, to be on ground zero, of a new beginning for all of us, man. And it's just an amazing thing. And I'm just appreciative to be in y'all's company.
Tom's back. Oh my God.
Yo, I don't know. I'm about to go out.
Back.
I have to go on my mobile hotspot. I'm about to go out and beat the crap out of my kids for playing Call of Duty and sucking up all the bandwidth while I'm doing the darn Nerds for Humanity live stream. But I'm gonna.
We took over for you.
Thank you.
Heidi snapped, right. She was like, she got the host response.
I love it.
I
love it. Thank you so much, Heidi.
I got you.
And Jonathan, I think you are at like one. You must be at 1% now. Are we gonna have to say goodbye to you?
I think it will happen naturally. It'll be a sad, natural disappearance. But we actually have we all shared our very emotional farewells, because we also lost you too. So
well, let's keep going as long as we can.
There's some good questions in there too.
Yeah. Let me. So there was a question. Gun. Dude, this is like a reality show where people are just dropping off.
Kicked off the island.
Yeah. So let's see this one. Here's a question from Soldier, who's a Nerds for Humanity member. How can the gang best support each of your campaigns from home?
For me, it's you got to go to Heidi2020.com/call. So calling for me is the number one thing right now. I need to reach out to these voters and get them to know about me. Overwhelmingly, the feedback from our phone banking so far is that people are undecided. They don't know who they're going to vote for, and they haven't heard about me, and they are curious and interested or very excited when they hear about me. So calling is so effective. And if you guys don't have any if you guys don't know what to do and you want to continue this wave, this humanity first wave, I would say call for me would be amazing. If you can do that and you have a couple bucks, that basically funds our phone banking right now. Those funds are going to each dial. Each dial has a cost. So every dollar helps a phone banker reach somebody else and tell them about me and my message and get that out there, because people get their ballots on Wednesday, which is April 29th, if you're watching this later. So my primary is basically going full blast right now. So every single call you make is massive value, and I'd really appreciate that help.
Right on.
Yeah, I'm echoing what she said. Same thing. Phone calls, and if you got to have a couple bucks to spare, please do. I think I need about $4,000 more dollars. And I will be good to go. So, I mean, if you just look at that, like I said, like I say all the time with my followers, I have about 8,000 something followers. So if everybody gave 50 cents, then I'll be fine. You know, I got about more to raise. And if you have some time to spare, please, make some phone calls on my behalf. I think a distributor forward is doing text messages on my behalf as well. So, if you can do any of that stuff, please do so. And you can definitely help us out.
And I presume all of the information about how to donate and how to volunteer is available from your respective websites?
Yes.
Yes. If they go to Heidi2020.com, all the info is there. Even better, though, if you just want to call, go to Heidi2020.com/call. Because that's where you get just all the info that you need right there. And you can jump onto the dialer very easily after you've looked at our training and the materials you need. It's all super easy. And of course, if you want to donate, then you can go to Heidi2020.com and send us a little money so we can keep calling people and hopefully win this seat, which would be epic. Jonathan's back. Hey. That's awesome. Back on his phone. I see you. Okay, so amazing. So we're just talking about what people can do to help our campaign from home was the question. So,
Jonathan, what can people do to help out the Herzog campaign?
Epic. Well, I'm sure it's the same as everyone has been saying, but if you go to Herzog2020.com, this is an all digital canvassing and organizing apparatus. In many ways, even though this is tragic and a disaster for the world and for our homes and communities, this is the Yang Gang's time to shine. We are the experts. We wrote the playbook on how to digitally organize, and we can 100% win. There is no doubt. In the 10th district alone, in this congressional primary, if we get 2% of all New Yorkers who live on the west side of Manhattan and South Brooklyn, 2% of them to vote by mail for this vision, for our vision, we have won the seat. Just 15,000 people. That's what we need to unseat a 30-year dinosaur incumbent, one of the most powerful people in the House, in the country. That's what we need, 15,000 people. And if you think about this, Andrew Yang got 5.1% or so of the popular vote amongst registered Democrats in Iowa. We need basically just that in New York, in my home district, in Andrew's home district, in the campaign's headquarters home district. I mean, this is eminently winnable. We can get this done in 8 short weeks. So it's Herzog2020.com to sign up to volunteer. A lot of it is happening on social media and press and our weekly digital dialectics that are happening Thursdays at 7 p.m. And I guess maybe I'll announce it here. We are going to be having Michael Sandel on this Thursday, April 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern on our digital dialectic. So it should be an epic conversation. But yes, please do sign up, volunteer, chip in, because we can get this done. We have to.
Wow.
And Jonathan, for those who are not familiar with Michael, can you tell us a little bit about why he's a special person?
Totally. Well, Michael Sandel is quote unquote the rock star moral philosopher of our time. If you just Google Michael Sandel or justice, I mean, he is one of the most influential, thoughtful thinkers about the common good, the tyranny of meritocracy, and really the philosophy that underpins so much of the Yang Gang and our movement. So he is arguably, by some measures, the #1 top moral philosopher of our time. He's epic, and I'm so stoked to have him on.
Dude, you weren't messing around when you decided to call it a dialectic. I mean, you're really following through now.
Well, definitely I've gotten some shit for calling it a dialectic, but it genuinely is intended to be just that. In true nerd spirit, like we can and will and must be solving these problems before we even have the permission to. I mean, that's what Andrew's leadership has shown us, right? I mean, he's not in power. No one has appointed him and given him permission to, but he just led the single biggest direct cash transfer in American history.
No.
I mean, so like, there's nothing stopping us. I mean, this is the power of platforms like yours, Tom, and what you've all built is it's permissionless, right? Infinite scalability, and like you can change the world from literally just staring at your iPhone.
I love it. I love it. As long as the kids don't play too much Call of Duty, I'm on here. Oh, here's a question for Jermaine. You were referring to your 6'7" chocolateness. Not something I've been accused of when I was growing up. But the question from Tamar is, who was the person that kind of took a chance on you and that believed in you? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so his name is Elbert Perry. They used to go. He went by the name of Kool-Aid, and that was his nickname. Everybody knows him as Kool-Aid. So if you're from Los Angeles, you know this guy's name is Kool-Aid. And I would come to practice, and so he actually coached my brother. He coached my older brother before my brother passed away, and he really didn't want me to end up going down the same type of paths that my family members went down. So I used to come to practice, and he used to curse me out. Oh my God, like he used to curse me out. Get your mother, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh my, it was bad. So I was like, man, do I really want to play basketball then? Like, man, this guy, he was cursing me out. But this man, him and his assistant coach, they loved me, man. Like they loved me. And I could tell because, to this day, we never had to pay for any of the, to go to private school or prep school, you have to pay money. I never had to pay anything. I never had to pay for shoes. I never had to pay for clothes. I never had to pay for anything. The day that school would let out, that literally the next day I would be on an airplane somewhere going to Colorado or going to Arizona or going somewhere to play at some basketball camp or going to New York or going to New Jersey, somewhere to play in some basketball tournaments or some camp somewhere, or I was doing something. I was never in my environment. He would always take me out of my environment to expose me to different things. I never had to pay for food. I didn't have to worry about anything. And that's something when you have a 15-year-old kid or 16-year-old kid who's homeless, and it's like he literally took me under his wing, him and his assistant coach, and without that type of, that type of investment in my life, I don't know where I would have been. I don't know where I'd be to this day had he not invested in me.
Right on. Well, Kool-Aid definitely sounds like he changed the trajectory of your life.
He flew to, the day I graduated from college, he literally flew into South Carolina for one day to come see me graduate from college and then left that same day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. Here's not a question, a comment from Lizzie Liz, who's saying she's from a different district, New York 16. All the candidates on here, and she's going to donate to all of you. So I'm going to give a little Nerds for Humanity gong for that.
Yay!
Nice.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie Liz. Delivering.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Lizzie also has a question, which is like, okay, what's your kind of approach to passing UBI? I mean, I think we all have the general view of how it works, but when you get into the brass tacks, like, do you do a pilot? What amount? How does it get funded? Like, how have you thought about you're in a position of power and influence? If you win your elections, how are you going to actually get this thing done?
Well, I'm actually going to be announcing my pilot next month, so I'm I'm getting mine going. I've got my pilot already getting going. We're gonna make a big old announcement and all that stuff. So look out for that. So my plan is to have this information, so when I get into the state house, that I can go in there already with the results of what the pilot program has done and what it's going to be doing, as well as I've been calling a lot of people. I've talked to Scott. I talked to Andrew. I've talked to multiple people, the Yang policy team, and we're working on the not just the policy, but the white papers behind it on how we're going to pay for it on a local level. So this will be the first one of its kind to actually be able to be passed throughout the United States. So we won't even have to wait on Congress anymore. After I get this thing drawn up and created, we'll be able to put this in all 50 states. And like I said, it's the first one of its kind, and I will gladly pass it on to everybody else.
Right on.
Awesome.
Heidi and Jonathan, how do you want to get this done in DC?
Well, hopefully I can get it done with Jonathan. That would be pretty amazing. So hopefully we'll be doing that. I mean, yeah, let's be honest, it's not going to be easy. It's not like we're just going to run in there as like freshmen, like Congress members, and just be like, all right, well, that's
we
it.
have arrived.
This is what I say, UBI for all, and like it's just going to float on through. I mean, we'd all love that, right? But unfortunately, there's some pragmatism and realities that are going to go on. I mean, absolutely, I'm going to, bring forth a bill, in my first 100 days. I believe that was a question somewhere. And that's a pledge that I've made with the UBI caucus and all of that, of course, I'm going to put forward a bill and hopefully have some awesome co-sponsors. I know that now, since, we're going through COVID-19, tragically, a lot of, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has come out for UBI a lot more. So I do think that there's a coalition that can be built. And I think that one way that we can sort of get the other side of the aisle sort of involved and willing to work with us is to also put forth some nonpartisan policies that Yang and ourselves are also fighting for, as far as democracy reform, things like ranked choice voting, things that we can all get behind in a nonpartisan way, so we can start forming coalitions that are needed when we need their support when it comes down to UBI. So I think that we need to be, we need to realize the pragmatic realities, but we also need to form the necessary coalitions and work politically to make these changes happen and form our arguments in a way that appeal to both sides, because UBI is not a partisan issue to me. I think that it appeals to the right for certain reasons and the left for other reasons. And I believe that if we start by building those coalitions on some of our other possibly more palatable nonpartisan policies that we want to get through, such as things to do with democracy reform, other things that, we could all kind of get behind, maybe a little more easy, that don't necessarily require a budgetary change or a new tax. Then I feel like coalitions can start to be formed, especially if we are able to get more people into Congress. And I know that Jonathan has Freedom Democrats, which is going to be vital and important for moving our movement forward, because we do need to elect more members of Congress. It's not going to be enough to just have, me and Jonathan and David or whoever else gets in there. We're going to need, a huge coalition. So we have to support other down ballot candidates so that we can have that coalition growing and growing and growing throughout the years, and we will get it passed. It's just a matter of time at this point. It's just a matter of when.
Jonathan, your thoughts on how you sort of go from here's this great theoretical idea to actually getting something done in that wonderful city of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so two things. One is I completely agree with Jermaine and Heidi, which is this wave of Freedom Democrats and more people being inspired to run, and us rallying and getting behind them, behind candidates committed to universal basic income and the humanity forward agenda, and all supporting each other, will be critical, because we need a wave. We need really dozens of new legislators in city, state, and federal legislatures alike. The other thing is, one of the most effective and direct ways to convince people, which now a majority of Republicans and Democrats alike support a basic income during the pandemic, is to pass a basic income or some version of it for the duration of the pandemic. And so putting the pressure and, again, the feet to the fire for our representatives across the board, and activating to make sure that right now, amidst this urgent crisis, we get a $2,000 per month basic income for every adult. Right now, during this crisis, once more and more people actually see the benefits and get a direct cash transfer and see that it doesn't hurt them, it doesn't hurt their neighbor, it doesn't suddenly make us these lazy couch potatoes, but it actually improves our lives. That will be one of the most direct ways. And then finally, I'll say we need a shock to the system. Now, ideally, that shock would have been Andrew Yang being elected on this national mandate. But as we've seen in the history of grassroots movements, it's not about one person, it's about all of us. And so in my case, what I'm focused on over the next 8 weeks is that shock in the system being unseating Jerry Nadler in his home turf, in my home in the 10th district.
All right. That would be a shock for sure. And it'll be, I can't wait to celebrate with you, Jonathan, when that happens.
I'm coming to New York for that one.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. All right. Here's a question. It's a really interesting question in that so much of what makes America special is this spirit of individualism and a spirit of everybody pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps. You know, they traveled from east to west with nothing but a wagon and a shovel and a mule. And, you know, so there's this belief that, hey, you know, anything I get, I have to, you know, work myself to the bone because that's just the American way. And when some people hear the idea of basic income, they immediately say like, oh, but that's so anti-hard work. It's anti-work ethic. It's anti-entrepreneurial. Well, how do you guys think about kind of shifting that conversation or meeting people where they are and helping them kind of think it through a little more?
Well, how are you going, like Martin Luther King said, how could you pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't have any bootstraps? You know, I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous that, you know, someone could say something like that. You know, I always talk about when I'm trying to get people to understand my point, I say, well, if you go to a community and this community literally is only reliant upon the people that are inside this community. So if everybody in this community thinks the same, how does anybody in that community know that their thinking is wrong? So they, you know, everybody in there is just reliant upon each other's thinking. So until somebody gets outside of that community is when they start to see that there's something different. It's kind of like what I went through. You know, I saw what I saw every single day, and that was normal to me until I got outside. Then it was like, oh, now there's other things that are out there that can go along with that. So these people are talking about, you know, this, we can't give you this, we can't give you that. If you get one person such as like I had Kool-Aid that came from the outside to grab me and pull me out and give me a different environment to show me that there's different things out there, you know, I can actually utilize that. But nobody has ever done anything great by themselves. I don't care who it is. Nobody. You can't tell me not one person who did something great by themselves. Everybody is relying upon somebody to give them either a piece of knowledge, to give them some money, to give them the push or some, you know, something. Somebody has given them something. There's been nobody out there that somebody just came up with, you know, this idea. Somebody influenced them with something. And sometimes it's just the money that can help influence people. Sometimes people have the greatest ideas in the world, but they don't have the money to actually get the idea off the ground. So, you know, it's just certain things that we have to really own up to and know that, you know, you cannot tell somebody to pull themselves up by their own bootstrap if they don't have the bootstrap to pull themselves up with.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations about this. I mean, one conversation I had recently was about, homelessness and, just trying to get people to imagine, like, hey, imagine that you end up homeless. I mean, it happens to people all the time. Everybody's on the verge of poverty all the time in the way that our economy is set up. You can lose a job, you can not pay your bills, you can be out on the street within months. And then imagine that you are homeless and, someone walks by you and says something like, hey, why don't you get a job, you bum? And you're like, great. Well, I would love to get a job, but I look pretty bad right now. I don't think anybody's going to hire me. I'm not well rested. I can't get any food. I can't meet my basic needs. I couldn't print out a resume. I couldn't actually travel and get to a job, an interview. I couldn't do these things because I'm left at zero. I don't have, any cards to play in this game. I'm left without cards. How can I play the game? If you don't pass go and collect your 200, you can't play Monopoly. And that's the situation that people are in, to where you literally cannot get yourself up if you don't have a floor to stand on. If you can't actually get up off the floor because there's no floor, then you can't actually make it, right? So I think that if you can get people to imagine that, or think of somebody in their life that's been in that situation, if they've never been there, and try to be like, hey, who helped you out? Like Jermaine was saying, you have to have something to get something else, right? There's this common, meme, and I guess in America with, you have to have money to make money, right? You have to get money to make money. Everybody says that. Oh, you got to have money to make money because then you got to buy this and you got to do that. Why do we not understand that with our poor? Where did we lose our humanity? Where did we lose this? So I think you have to get people back to humanity. We've become so hard and cold as a society. And if you reach people and connect with them and make them realize that we all deserve that floor and no one should ever fall below that, then I think that we can get around this mindset that we've gotten into.
Jonathan?
So I would say, tragically and terrifyingly, historically, it's taken a war, a crisis like the Great Depression. It's taken a crisis at such a scale and scope to enact any sort of semblance of structural change. And one of our mandates, one of the things that is so powerful about our vision and about a universal basic income in particular, part of the goal is so that we don't rely upon crisis to enact structural change, and to create the conditions within the system and our institutions that let them change and amend and grow themselves. But tragically, historically, we don't have a great track record because it has taken war, essentially, to trigger any sort of structural mobilization and change. Now, we saw that something like climate change, for example, was insufficient, or at least has been, because there's this time horizon, right? It's some notion of, well, my future self, or my future, my children or my grandchildren, but maybe not me, or maybe I'm not feeling the directs really concretely myself, or maybe it's them, maybe it's those folks, not me, not my family, not community. What we may potentially see, and again, these coming weeks and months will be so critical, or even coming days when they're phasing out part 2 of the stimulus, and why we have to put so much pressure, and not just hashtagging and trending, but calling and writing letters and protesting, because this is the test. It's happening now over the coming days, of whether during this unprecedented pandemic that has already wiped out 50,000 people and will continue to wipe out tens of thousands more, whether we can enact this type of change now. Because if we can't do it now, it is exponentially harder to do it when we're not under these conditions of duress. The other thing I'll say is just the power of story and the power of narrative, and why it's so important that each of us is running in our own communities, because we are of, by, and from our own districts, and can only, as Jermaine said, really speak that language authentically ourselves. And so in my case here in the 10th district, again, like the way you frame and talk about even a policy like a universal basic income for me is fundamentally different. When I'm talking to, you know, the tens of thousands of LGBT people, predominantly young professionals, among those who vote and predominantly those who work in financial services, you know, I talk about how 1 in 5 LGBT Americans lives in poverty, about how 1 in 3 trans kids of color lives in poverty, and that's the way I'll frame it. When I talk to the Upper West Side voters, right, the you know, more kind of affluent folks who live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, again, I frame it in very stark and bleak and explicit terms, only because I think it's true, which is I looked at the data on German unemployment and Nazi seats in the Reichstag. And we are talking about 3 weeks ago, the Federal Reserve put out projections for unemployment in the United States worse than the Great Depression. I don't think we fully internalized and processed that. And so when I'm talking to these folks and when we present ourselves in the voter guide, I actually quote Theodore Wolff, who in 1933 said, one could never imagine in a country as diverse as ours, anything but democracy. And this is Theodore Wolff writing in 1933 in Germany. And then I quote, again, this is in the voter guide, I will go out to voters in a number of weeks. I quote Yuval Harari, who says, whoever owns the algorithms is the government. And hopefully by making this case directly in the language of people, where they are, meeting them where they are, we can break people out of this crippling mindset.
Yeah, it's amazing. Your reference to World War II. I'm actually in the middle of the, I think Netflix has a new series, a colorized version of World War II footage, and the rise of Hitler during such an economically strenuous time for Germany, that it does give the conditions for a lot of the most kind of negative parts of humanity to come kind of rear its head. And hopefully we don't go down that path, but you could argue that sort of, go ahead, Jonathan.
But I think critically, right at that juncture, what history has shown us again, there is no inevitability, there is no teleology, there is no, oh, you know, the path of history runs itself. There are people, there are ideas, and people who act upon them. And there is nothing stopping anything from happening unless we do something about it. I mean, just think about the first juncture of Andrew even deciding to run in the first place. And would we even have the idea of a universal basic income front and center at the table? I mean, it just, there is nothing, like, hope will not suffice. It just won't, it hasn't. And it just requires people and people acting on ideas and taking sacrifice. It's just the cold, hard truth of how anything fundamentally ever changes.
Right on. Let's take one more question from the audience, and then I will let you all make sort of, if there's anything else you wanted to share that we didn't get to, we can do that. But here's the last question from Trumper for Yang, who's actually going to be on the show in a month or so. And he's asking a trade-off question. You know, let's say you can't get everything at once, and you had to decide between, you know, like a Green New Deal or basic income. Both people could argue are existential and crucial. How do you think about making hard calls around resource allocation for these equally major issues facing the country and society?
The way
basic income first.
I mean,
yeah, as simple as that. I mean, what Jonathan said. I mean, it's most important. I think that, you know, obviously climate change is a huge issue, but if you have to choose between eradicating poverty and putting more money into climate change. I mean, there's things we can do that cost no money to help with climate change, like regulations. So it's not necessarily necessary for us to put money into it to make a big dent. We can allocate current resources, we can pass laws, we can do things that cost nothing. So of course, basic income takes, precedent. I mean, that's eliminating poverty. That would be the biggest thing that we could possibly do ever in the history of mankind, ever. So we can't put that off for anything. If those are our choices, obviously I'd rather do both. I'm a Democrat, but if those are our choices, get rid of poverty. Come on, that's a no-brainer.
What do you think, Jermaine?
Yeah, you invest in people. If you invest in people, then that means you're creating a whole new insurmountable amount of people that can actually assist with this, climate change issue. We don't know how many intelligent individuals we have right now that were just looking for an opportunity to assist with this. They probably have some ideas. There's probably some people right now that are sleeping outside that are trying to figure out how they can assist with certain things. But we have to go with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The theory of, listen, I'm at the bottom of the barrel just looking for food, water, shelter. Like that's it. That's all I'm looking for. But once you get up a few levels in this theory, you can start to contribute more. And we have people that are literally out there that have these ideas, that have, all this stuff that want to contribute, but they can't because financially they just can't get out of it. They can't get out of their own situation.
All right. So let me close with giving you guys an opportunity to either share stuff that's coming up, more information about what you're working on, or if there was a topic that you were like, hey, we didn't get to touch on this, but I feel like we should, kind of highlight it. Let us know. And maybe we'll start with you, Heidi, and then we'll go clockwise. Heidi, any closing thoughts before we wrap?
Sure. I would just urge anybody watching this who likes my message, likes who I am and what I have to say, to get involved with my campaign, because literally people can start voting in a few days. And I don't think a lot of people understand the magnitude of my race. Like, some people have expressed things like, well, maybe we should wait until Heidi wins her primary to back her. Guess what? This district hasn't been Republican since 1975. I'm in a solid, safe, Democratic district. If I win the primary, I win the general. They're not going to flip the seat to Republicans. It's not happening. And guess who had a similar story? Somebody you might have heard of named AOC. Have you ever thought, hey, AOC is cool. Wish she was more pro-UBI though. Wish she was into, more of Yang's policies. Wish she could fight for those. Wish we had somebody like that in Washington, D.C. I'm that person for you. Like, don't sleep on my race. People start voting in a few days. Go to Heidi2020.com. If you can, donate. If you can't, sign up to Phone Bank. This is our time. We have a chance to make a huge impact and bring that wave literally crashing down. And I promise you, I'll be the one to do that. I'll be the one to be fighting for UBI every single day for you, for the entire country, for the people of my district. I will fight for humanity first policies, and I will promise to put people over politics every single time, because I cannot stand politics, and I can't stand Democrats or Republicans that do not fight for the people of their district, and I'm not willing to put up with it. So get involved with my campaign now. Now is literally the time. If you're watching this in time, hopefully you are. If you're not, I still hope to connect with you. And thank you so much for having me and for all your support and for everybody listening to my message. And I hope that I've inspired you in some way.
Woo! All right. Jermaine, any final remarks from you, sir?
Man, Heidi, you've inspired me.
Shit, man. I'm like fired up and ready to go.
I'm ready to go, baby.
Shoot.
Yeah. I'll just say ditto what Heidi said. Yeah, I'm out here in South Carolina, and if you're in South Carolina, if you're watching from South Carolina, I would love to have your support. Love to have you make some phone calls, text messages, any type of contributions that you can give. I want to be the inspiration, and I want to be the hope for all the future, current and future generations, to let them know that your past does not define your future. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter, who your parents were or any of that stuff. You can be who you want to be. You can do what you want to do, and you can be as great as you want to be. We can do what we want to do out here. We can change the world. And the individuals that you just watched out here today, we are the individuals who are trying to spark that change. And we were all influenced by our leader, Andrew Yang. So let's go ahead. Let's get out here. Let's do what we have to do. Let's change the world. And it's starting with us today.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's do this. All right, Jonathan, you have the last remark, and then I'll just make some closing suggestions to our audience. But Jonathan, what do you want to say to the crowd?
First thing I'll say is I love you all. Thank you so much. And courage is contagious. We see that in all of the incredible people who were on today. The other is that no one will be our savior. We have to save ourselves. Again, there is no inevitability. There is no teleology. There is no natural order to the universe. There are people, there are ideas, and there are people acting on those ideas to make them reality. So it's on all of us. It's really on all of us to make this vision a reality and to make this a possibility. And I'll just say, one quick story from this was late 2018, and there were 5, then 6 people on the campaign. The campaign was essentially bankrupt. No media, no press, no polls, nothing. We're in the car in Iowa. We're like, on the way back from the Progress Iowa event. And Andrew gets like a notification, like a ding on his phone. And we got the first 1% CNN poll and a non-qualifying poll for the debate. And he freaks out. He gets so elated, and just the car is just filled with joy. And I'm kind of like, what? We got 1% in a non-qualifying poll because the DNC drew the lines so with these dates. And he's like, no, you guys don't get it. Like, I mean, in Andrew speak, we have product market fit. Our first 1%, we got this first 1%. That means there's nothing stopping us. And I just want you to think of how resilient and how much we've grown and how far we've come. And there is no ceiling. There's no ceiling on this movement, no ceiling on where we will all take this. So thank you all so much. And this really is just the beginning. Let's win, and let's win big.
Thank you so much. This will be the equivalent of Andrew's ding for the notification for the Dream Team. Oh yeah, baby.
Yeah.
That's the sound of victory.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, let me just wrap with this. I would like everyone watching this live now and on replay to think about the quality of the people we had on this panel, and to think about how in about 6 or 7 months, they could all be representatives in various forms of government, leading change and driving a whole new way of looking at problem solving that goes well beyond the kind of old Republican, Democrat kind of tired arguments. And it's time. Not only does the country desperately need real forward-thinking, new ideas, dispassionate problem solving, but it also needs people like Heidi and Jermaine and Jonathan and Mike, who are just decent, good politicians. That's how it works. If we don't vote people we respect and support into office, we're just going to get the same results over and over again. So I am so delighted and really grateful that you guys spent almost 2 hours with us in this conversation. and Herzog, you went through multiple devices, so appreciate that. And please check the links below for access to Heidi, Jermaine, Mike, and Jonathan's websites. Please donate if you can, volunteer if you can, like, share this content, and I cannot wait to see you guys all in office making change and helping just America really recover, but then, you know, go further than we've ever gotten before. So thank you. And with that, we'll say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye,
nerds.
I love it. All right.